Welcome, comic fans and collectors. Thanks for tuning in to Iconic Keys. Today, I'd like to talk about Marvel's Werewolf by Night, issues 32 and 33. Werewolf by Night is the ongoing saga of Jack Russell and his struggle with his lycanthropic curse. Russell's father was cursed before his birth when he read a passage from the Book of Darkhold. The Book of Darkhold you'll see popping up in various Marvel horror and supernatural comics over the years. It's later revealed that the origins of the curse dated from a much earlier point in the family's Eastern European bloodline. The Werewolf by Night series ran for 43 issues, from September of 72 to March of 77. The specific issues I'm going to talk about today from that run, though, are more well known for the fact that they feature the first two appearances of Mark Spector. Mark Spector is better known as the Moon Knight. These issues were written by Doug Minch and penciled by Don Perlin. I couldn't find any specific circulation data for issues 32 or 33. However, Captain America issue 188 from August of 75, the same month, had a statement of circulation just over 180,000. Amazing Spider-Man issue 147 from that month came in at just over 273,000. So I'm going to assume that Werewolf by Night 32 probably had a run somewhere under those two. So let's go ahead and dive into the story a little bit. Issue 32 opens with a fight in progress between the werewolf and the Moon Knight. The two are fighting it out in the middle of a dirty alley as a crowd has gathered to watch the action. Moon Knight has come well prepared for the fight, though, and appears to be gaining the upper hand with his silver throwing crescents and his solid silver cestus. The werewolf decides to reflect on the events of the previous day. Probably not the best time for mournful reflection, but what the hell. Either way, we get treated to a nice flashback. On the previous day, Jack had turned into a werewolf and badly injured his friend Buck. Buck ended up in the hospital in pretty dire shape. After Jack finds out what he's done, he visits the hospital to check in on Buck. At the hospital, he finds Lissa, his sister, and Topaz, his current love interest. Topaz was actually an occult sorceress who would later be seen in the pages of Doctor Strange. Jack eventually returns home to find Moon Knight in his living room. In some handy exposition, Moon Knight informs Jack that he's been hired by the committee for the sum of $10,000 to bring him in alive. Jack's stepfather manages to distract Moon Knight long enough for Jack to make his escape. Moon Knight eventually catches up with Jack later that night, and we snap back to the fight in the alley. The fight continues to go in Moon Knight's favor, and eventually he's able to render the werewolf unconscious and drag him to his helicopter. While this is all going on, Frenchie, who is Mark Spector's driver, kidnaps Lissa and Topaz from the hospital, presumably to take them to the committee as well. The committee may have wanted Lissa, since she also carries the curse from the Book of Darkhold. The action continues in issue 33, which opens with the werewolf coming to in Moon Knight's helicopter. The werewolf begins attacking Moon Knight. In the struggle, the two fall into the ocean below. Moon Knight then drags the stunned werewolf onto the nearby docks, where the battle continues. As the two skirmish, the sun begins to rise, and the werewolf morphs back into his human form. With a well-placed boot to the jaw, Jack Russell goes down for the count. Moon Knight then rendezvous with Frenchie, and together they transport their bounties to the committee. Back at the committee headquarters, the leader of the organization pays Moon Knight his $10,000 bounty. Jack Russell is now locked in a cage, while Lissa and Topaz are bound to a nearby wall. The committee member then reveals that his plan is to use Jack as a secret weapon to eliminate his rivals. Jack yells at Moon Knight and tells him that he hasn't just captured a monster, but an actual human being. He then asks Moon Knight, "Are you shocked to hear that I'm an honest-to-God person?" Something in Jack's words stirs Moon Knight's conscience, and he begins to regret having captured the werewolf. As the moon rises on the third night, Jack transforms once again into the werewolf. Moon Knight resolves not to allow the committee to use the werewolf as their personal secret weapon. He frees Jack, and together they launch a joint attack on the committee members. Most of the members flee in terror, but the werewolf manages to rake their leader across the face with his claws. Moon Knight uses his crescent darts to free Lissa and Topaz, and then runs off into the night. When the room is clear of enemies, the werewolf likewise leaves and absconds off into the darkness. It's interesting to read these issues if you're into Moon Knight at all, just to see the character in his infancy. Like many characters in comics, he becomes way more fleshed out and compelling in subsequent years as other writers and artists get to work with him. Eventually, we discover that his powers were bestowed upon him by the Egyptian god Khonshu. This may or may not be the case, though, as we also learn that Mark Spector is just one manifestation of what seems to be a dissociative identity disorder. If you want to pick these up, they've become pretty pricey lately. The CGC census currently shows 19 copies graded at 9.8, 307 at 9.0, and 384 at 8.5, with 3,268 copies graded in totality. A slab's 9.8 recently sold for over $30,000 at auction. A pretty beat up raw copy of 32 at the time of this video will run you around $300 to $400. If you are interested in reading a physical copy, though, there's hope. Just get a copy of Moon Knight, Volume 5, Issue 20. They're still pretty cheap. Inside, you'll find a full reprint of Werewolf by Night, Issues 32 and 33. Until next time, thanks for watching and take care.